across pests, I mean insects, they're a $500 billion problem in the world. We spend, absolutely vast amounts of money and vast quantities, about 40 million tons of chemical insecticide every year, treating insect pests, and about 10% of all the food we grow gets eaten before it makes it off the field. And I knew none of this when we started it, but we started scratching in this space and we realized, actually, no, this is huge.
Welcome to Leaders on a Mission. I'm your host, Simon Leach, and thanks for joining. And look, with bedbug infestations surging by 250% this year across the UK, what if we could revolutionize pest management with cutting-edge technology? And in today's, I'm really pleased to welcome to the show Robert Fryer, CEO of Spotta, who's really making this vision a reality, right? So we'll discover how Spotta's innovative sensing technology is transforming pest control and creating new opportunities for growth. So Robert, I know you're a very busy man. I really appreciate your time coming on the show today. Looking forward to the chat.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks.
So maybe we'll just kind of give thought towards, I suppose, before, maybe leading up to founding Spotta, maybe a couple of impactful moments really from your career that led to you.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, there were probably two main points that really, the major stepping stones that led to the founding of Spotta. So I spent the first 5-6 years of my career designing medical devices. So I was doing things like pacemakers and implants for eyes and, really interesting technical problems that they're very hard. They're going to make a massive impact. They're going to make, millions of people's lives better. But it was about 2 or 3 years into one of the projects I was doing there, and I sat down with one of the, I was a young junior engineer on this thing. He said, "Yeah, this is going great. If this goes well, this will be in people in about 20 years' time." And I thought to myself, 20 years, that's a very, very long time to wait to have an impact on what we're doing. And it was really rewarding work, but it was at that point there was a bit of an eye opener for me of, actually, I want to do something that's going to make a difference, before I retire. So that was, so I left that job in 2013, and my co-founder and I, we started a business where we were looking for simple consultancy business just to pay the bills, but getting exposed to lots of different industries and looking for opportunities to build something that we could scale, a product business that would also have a really positive impact. And we knew that was what we wanted. I had absolutely no idea it was going to end up being in insect monitoring, which is what we do at Spotta. But about 4 or 5 years into that, we ended up talking to one of the big pest control companies, and they asked us to, present some ideas for innovative new products for smart rodent monitoring. And one of the things they specifically asked us about was, could we make a rodent trap that had a light on top to tell them if there was something inside it? And I remember sitting in this meeting with this, executive on their technical development team and thinking, and I could tell my co-founder Neil was thinking exactly the same thing, is that the ambition in this industry? The level of automation you want is you still want the guy to go to the depot, pick up the van, drive to the site, get out of the van, walk across the site. You just want him to not have to lift the lid on the box. You're missing a trick here, guys. So we politely declined the job and got to work on what, started just getting us thinking about the space and how limited the amount of technical development that had happened over the past few decades. And we thought, with our skills in low power sensing, we can do something here. And the more we started digging into it, the more we realized, actually, this isn't just rodents. It's not just, things in kitchens. This is across pests. I mean, insects, they're a $500 billion problem in the world. We spend, absolutely vast amounts of money and vast quantities, about 40 million tons of chemical insecticide every year, treating insect pests. And about 10% of all the food we grow gets eaten before it makes it off the field. And I knew none of this when we started it, but we started scratching in this space and we realized, actually, no, this is huge. And the problem is the bugs grow exponentially. And when they're growing exponentially, if you can catch them even a little bit earlier, before that hockey stick curve of population shoots up and causes massive damage and huge costs, if you can catch them even a little bit earlier, you could have a really big impact. Okay, Can we build a sensor? What are people doing now, we thought. We went and looked, and the answer was either nothing, they wait and see that crops have already been eaten, or there's a plastic bucket or a bit of sticky paper and someone walks around with a clipboard and counts some insects. It wasn't exactly sophisticated, and because it's so labour intensive, it's very expensive. You can't have a trained entomologist every day on a farm going around looking for bugs. I thought, okay, yeah, this is the opportunity we've been waiting for. It's a massive problem, devastating environmental impact, ripe for technical disruption, and nobody was looking at it. And that was where Spotta came from.
Amazing. So tell us a little bit about, you've outlined some of the problems you've solved, as it were. But yeah, tell me what it does, what the technology does, what the company is all about.
Sure. Okay, so we make internet-connected monitors for insects. So they are small boxes, typically about the size of an ice cream tub, that you can put in a forest, in a farm, in a grain store, in a textile factory, anywhere you might have insects. And it detects and identifies insects in the vicinity and gives a report on an hourly or daily basis of what species are present. And then we can give that information to our customers. In some cases, you mentioned bedbugs a minute ago, that's as simple as, we found one, you need to go and do something, here's the picture of it. At the other end, we've got programs with national governments where they're using it to manage entire industries. And we've got thousands of monitors reporting in, and we give them a heat map basically of, this area of this farm's a problem, this one's over here is fine, you don't need to waste your time looking at this. And what we're starting to get into now is some forecasting as well, and building in population models to say, okay, and what we're seeing here in March means that by May, if you don't do anything, it's going to be a big problem. And you could use a quarter of the amount of insecticide if you did it next week instead of waiting a month.
Awesome. So maybe before we come back into the bed bugs and I know some of the work that you've been doing, I think with pine weevils as well. It looks fascinating. But just tell us from an innovation viewpoint, what the technology, the innovation in the technology.
Sure. So the thing that makes Spotta very different to anything else out there is that we basically have come up with a way of crunching down the sort of image processing that, if you do it by conventional AI methods, you need either a very powerful computer. This is why NVIDIA is now the most valuable company in the world, is because they make the graphics cards that do that, and they cost $1,000 each. You either need one of those, or you need a high bandwidth data connection to stream that information back up to a cloud server where Google or someone has those graphics cards, and you can just pay them to rent theirs. And neither of those work if you're in a forest or a farm or a desert, because you don't have a high bandwidth internet connection.
Yeah.
You can't afford to put multiple $1,000 units out every hectare. And even if you did, you can't get power to them. So what we've invented at Spotta is, by just being smart about what we try to do on the device, what we do in the cloud, how much data we transmit, is basically crunch that problem down until you can do that real-time image detection of insects and identify the species on a small, very affordable bit of electronics that can run for a year off a single alkaline battery. And how we do that is the core of our technology.
So how do you do that then?
Well, you have to be very judicious about what you choose to spend energy on doing. You are running it on the sort of microprocessor that would typically control your microwave. So it's very low power, very limited in the amount of data processing you can do in that device. And you want to make sure that you're only spending time analyzing images when there's actually something of value, some data of value to extract there. So we are not streaming real-time HD video, because that would be completely, you couldn't even get started with that. At the other end, we're also not analyzing right down to identify everything that's in every frame right at the beginning. We use a probabilistic approach to decide what is worth transmitting and what isn't.
Yeah, got it. So how much of that is all related to AI as well, like the technology?
So there's a big overlap, and obviously AI means a lot of things to a lot of different people. And as an engineer myself, I slightly dislike the way that people are shoehorning in AI to every conversation. So in the case of this, we're talking about machine learning and computer vision, which are, if you draw a Venn diagram, they overlap a lot with AI. Sometimes they're the same thing, sometimes they're not. So we use AI in how we are analysing insects and identifying the species. The way we do it on the remote device and the way we do it in the cloud is quite different, but we do a bit of both.
Yeah, I got it. And there must be a hell of a lot of insects to kind of map and understand.
Yeah, absolutely. And if that's why we ended up doing the bedbugs first. So our first product was for bedbugs in hotels, and partly the reason we chose that was our first market. Well, one is because it's a massive problem; people spend a lot of money on it. But the other reason is it's indoors, it's dry. You don't see thousands and thousands of different species. You know, if you can cope with spiders, silverfish, bedbugs, and carpet beetles, you've probably covered most of what you're going to see. So it's a more contained technical challenge as a first step. It was a brilliant choice, except for the fact that we launched it in February 2020, and then in March 2020, every hotel in the world shut for 2 years. But apart from that little wrinkle, it was fine as a first step. But since then, we've been able to take the platform that we built with that and extend it out to work in outdoor environments like forests, you mentioned, with the pine weevil, but also in farms in Brazil and in the Middle East, where we do see a huge variety of different insects.
Awesome. No, that's great. So with the bed bugs, how, so if you tell me how it works then, like for instance, in fact, sorry, two questions. Is this a UK problem or is this a European global problem?
It's global. Every city has bed bugs.
Yeah. Okay.
Worldwide. It basically correlates a lot with how much international travel. So big tourist destination cities like Paris, London, Miami, bedbugs hitchhike basically on people's bags. So if you've got lots of visitors coming in, staying at an airport hotel, moving to a city hotel, then flying back off somewhere else, and they just get lots of opportunities to move around and get to new places. So yeah, you often see spikes of them around tourist season. So, for example, everything in the news last year around Paris, that's just, there's a peak every year at the end of the tourist season. The peak's been getting worse every year, but there'll be another one this summer, almost certainly.
Got it. Yeah. And how does the technology kind of work then, and how does it help?
So, in the case of bedbugs, our monitor, it's about the size of a pack of cards, and it sits underneath the bed. And it tracks any bed bugs in the vicinity into the monitor, where we then can identify them. And then from that, we identify a bed bug. A message goes straight to the hotel front desk so that they can, and their maintenance department and their pest controller if they want it to, so they can take that room out of service before anyone gets bitten. So most hotels, unfortunately, the only way they know they have a bed bug problem is if someone comes and complains at the front desk. What they then do is take the room out of service, obviously compensate that guest, probably have to grovel to get them not to put a nasty review on TripAdvisor because you'd expect a guest to do that. There's quite a lot of cost involved in that. And then they have to do the treatment. We basically replace the guest as the detection method. So the room will still need treating. We don't fix that problem, but we do prevent any of the negative reputational impact.
Got it. Yeah. And I was just thinking what you said about the spread and how quickly they spread. When you catch it early with your detection process, does that help commercially? Is it more commercially viable to kind of treat it early in the process?
You're much less likely to need repeat treatments, and it's much less likely to have spread to other rooms as well. So most hotels, if they get a report of a bed bug, they will inspect that room and then the rooms either side, above and below and opposite. And in some cases, if they find anything in there, then they'll extend it to the entire corridor or the entire floor. So if you can catch the first one or two, then you're much more likely to only have one room out of service for a week or two instead of potentially, 20, 30 rooms out of service.
Yeah, no, got it. So tell us a little bit about your ideal customers in that space then.
Yeah, so we work with a variety of different, everything from independent hotels. We have at the moment, pretty much a floor of about 50 rooms is about the minimum, but independent hotels, groups, operating groups, which might be franchisees of the big names that everyone knows, the Marriotts, the Wyndhams, the Hiltons of the world, or they might be their own independent group of hotels. That's probably the majority of our business at the moment, but we've got some good deals coming through with the brand companies as well. That's a longer road, as you'd imagine.
Yeah, absolutely. No, great. Thank you for that. And was it a big jump in order to take that into the forest then, from a technology viewpoint?
Yeah, so outdoors, in a hotel, as I said, is dry. It's relatively clean. You've got a relatively small number of insects. It's quite easy to get to the pods if they need, they need a cartridge swapping once a year for pheromone and battery. And you've got an internet connection. You can the cellular internet connection or the hotel's own internet connection, all readily available. None of that is true in a upper mountain in Scotland. We were fortunate that we were approached by what was then the Forestry Commission to engage us to build a solution for and bring our technology across to this pest of Hylobaeus avitis, which kills about 1 million trees a year in Scotland. We worked with them to develop it for that outdoor application and had to address how do you get an internet connection, up a mountain in the Highlands that works all day, every day for the entire year. How do you make a device that can be serviced only once a year because it's a 10-hour round trip to get to this site and back? How do you make it survive being buried under snow for 2 months of the year? All of those things. So yeah, there are a lot of technical challenges.
Wow. So tell us a little bit about that journey, because you've got the technology deployed and it's working, right? Am I right in thinking?
That's right. Yes. So we've deployed in about 15 different countries now. Several thousand different monitors for a few different specific applications. But yeah, that journey of making it ruggedized to work outdoors, and then the step that followed that was our first work in the Middle East for red palm weevil, which is then another incredibly harsh environment of the deserts in the Gulf states there, where we're protecting date palms, which get very heavily infested by this pest. So both of those very challenging environments. One of them cold, wet, very windy. The other dust storms and getting buried under sand and extreme heat. Sometimes our pods get up to 70, 80 degrees heat, which is, it's a challenging design environment to build a product for that. But actually, the core technology across all of them is exactly the same. So the electronics, the software, the firmware works exactly the same across all our different products. The difference really is the shape of the box for the particular insect that we're trying to monitor.
Yeah, no, great. And tell us a little bit about the problem it solves. I'm thinking about, you mentioned, say, around some of the kind of chemical insecticides that people use. So it's a replacement for kind of that, I suppose, to a certain degree, right?
Yeah, it is the equivalent of a so the way we use chemical insecticide at the moment before Spotta is like an artillery barrage. We chuck things everywhere and hope to hit. We spray it, blanket spray all over the place and hope to get what we're aiming for. And that breaks down because of two reasons. One is you're not targeted at all, so you've got to use an awful lot of them to hit the thing. But also, there's an endless arms race of the insects evolving pesticide resistance in exactly the same way as we have bugs developing antibiotic resistance. The same thing happens outdoors, where the common insecticides, that if you don't completely deal with them, all you're doing is killing the ones who are weak, and in helping the strong ones will be the ones that survive and breed, and therefore they breed in resistance to these insecticides. So that traditional approach is causing huge amounts of problems because it has massive collateral damage to all the other insect species out there. And we've all seen the graphs of what's happened to bee and butterfly populations, just absolutely plummeting over the last 30, 40 years. And at the same time, we're not actually solving the insect problem very well, because you spray and half the time it doesn't really work. And then you have to spray a different chemical, and maybe that will work for a few years and then they'll get resistant to that. So what we do is allow people to target in a much more precise way. We are the sniper rifle, not the machine gun here, to say this part of this field has an early stage infestation. So before it spreads, before it does loads of damage, we can catch it early. Instead of spraying an entire field, you might only spray a quarter of the field. And critically, because you're monitoring, you'll know whether it's worked. So you won't just keep spraying again and again with stuff that they're resistant to and just making that resistance stronger and stronger and stronger. You can switch to a more effective pesticide, or even to something that isn't chemical based at all. And this is the holy grail for the industry, is to shift away from chemicals by the ton to something much more targeted. And in some applications, we've looked at things like, for example, tomato growings in greenhouses. Relatively rare to use chemical insecticides now. The way that's managed is that you breed a population of predators that attack the insect and you release those into your greenhouse. Now, in a controlled environment like a greenhouse, you can do that because they won't just fly away. They'll be there and they'll protect your crops. However, outdoors, it's not very cost effective unless you can target and release them in the right place at the right time, because they just disperse into the environment. So by being able to target it, we can accelerate the shift. And if you look at the trends in this space, the cost of chemical treatments is gradually creeping up and up and up and up over time. And that's partly driven by regulation and extra taxes. And we've got targets for the whole of Europe to halve our chemical use over the next 7 or 8 years. At the same time, the biological controls, so this is sprays of targeted bacteria that will only attack the pest species, or predatory insects, the cost of those are coming down and down and down. But at the moment, we haven't reached the crossover point yet. But you introduce a tool that lets you target and use those more expensive things, but only where they're needed in exactly the right time, in exactly the right place. Suddenly they become cost effective, and we can bring that transition forward by maybe 5-6 years.
Well, maybe it's something that could all be used in an integrated fashion, it sounds like.
Absolutely, yeah. Yes, the whole industry uses an approach called integrated pest management, which is exactly what you're saying. You monitor, you get the ground truth, you assess where the pest pressure is, and when you reach a tipping point of is it economically viable to implement a certain treatment or not, then it's done. That's the theory. The practice in a lot of industries is that actually there's still what's called prophylactic spraying, which is I know I get this bug every year, and I know that I spray 2 weeks after the last frost because that works, and we'll do a blanket spray. And if that doesn't work, I'll do another one 2 weeks later, and then we're done. And that shift of mindset is happening. I think it's been as an environmentalist, it could happen quicker. But the shift to integrated pest management and the mindset of catch it early, see it, treat reactively rather than dumping chemicals in advance just in case is a transition that's happening, and we hope to help accelerate it. But the world is on that journey at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell me, like with the projects that you've run here, for instance, maybe outline for me, like with one of these two projects, how some of the success criteria, how it's worked in practice.
So one of the things that we always look for is what is the actionable change that our customer will make based on the information we're providing. Because we get a lot of people asking us, could you tell us about the population of this or that? And the answer is certainly yes, we can. But what's that? How does that help you manage it better? So in some cases, that's really obvious. Take the hotel example. Completely obvious that if you've got a guest complaining about bed bugs and we could have told you about it before that happened, you won't have any more complaints. Yeah, okay, that's pretty straightforward. In other cases, it's more nuanced. So, for example, the red palm weevil situation. So this is a pest that invisibly kills date palms from the inside. It causes about $2 billion of damage a year through the Gulf states and North Africa. And them developing their agriculture is a really important part for them being able to rebase their economies away from oil to something more sustainable, and becoming food secure so they aren't utterly dependent on food imports is an important part of that for them. And there are an awful lot of poor farmers in those areas who need support, and they get support from the government to help manage these pests. The problem is that this pest is pretty much invisible inside the trees. And so these governments run extremely expensive programs where they have small armies, thousands of people whose job it is to go around farm to farm to farm and inspect every tree. It's completely untargeted. But when they find one that's infested, they can then do a treatment, and it's either an injection or it's just spray that one tree. It's quite well targeted. But the bit that's missing there is, well, where do I go and look? I've got 40 million palm trees in my country. I can't go and check them every 45 days. Well, actually, that is what they do, and it's incredibly expensive and not very effective. But if I had a tool that let me see on a map, okay, I'm going to this farm today because that's clearly where the biggest problem is, then that, and when they've done a treatment, instead of it being another 2 months before they go back and see if it works, they'll see within a few days whether it's done it or not.
Oh, love it. Absolutely love it. Tell me, how quickly do these things spread? If you've got an infestation in a couple of trees, I mean, are you literally, you're going to be covered with the thing?
It depends entirely on the insect. So some insects, absolutely. I mean, the classic case that everyone will know about, of course, is locusts, where you can get enormous populations incredibly quickly, and they can be utterly devastating. On the other hand, you can have insects where they take years and years and years to build up to large populations. So an example of that, for example, is termites attacking timber frame buildings. Huge problem in Australia and the US. Billions and billions of damage done by termites to the fact that the houses and other buildings there that are all made of timber, and that can take quite a long time. But you don't see it until suddenly your building is structurally compromised. So being able to monitor that, so it does vary. There's no one size fits all with that.
Yeah, no, great. Thanks for that. And it sounds like it's been a fascinating journey into the world of agriculture from, as you mentioned, from medical devices. Tell me, where is the company, like when you consider scaling, how easy is it, what are your dreams and goals, I suppose, when it comes to scaling and growth?
Yeah. So, I mean, our vision is to change the way insects are managed worldwide and get away from this, blanket chemical application, which is expensive and not very effective. To do that, we are going to have to work with all the different companies, the different stakeholders in this space, from agronomy companies to the growers themselves to the chemical supply companies, who actually are surprisingly on board with this. You'd imagine, I went into this imagining a bit of a sort of tobacco industry rearguard action, trying to retain the business model of selling chemicals by the ton, and I've not experienced that, which has been pleasantly surprising. That actually a lot of those companies are quite forward thinking, in that they know this is coming and they're already starting to shift their business models away from selling chemicals by the barrel to something more sophisticated. And so us partnering with companies like that to help them make that transition, and then of course the weight of a multi-billion-dollar company behind that to then drive that through the industry becomes quite a nice fit. But ultimately, we want to show the way. There are 30, 40, 50 multi-billion-dollar problem pests out there. We're currently a relatively small team based in Cambridge, and we're addressing some of them. We're not going to address all of them. This is a very big pool, and there's going to be other players in there, and that's not a problem for us. But at the moment, we have a pretty strong technological lead over anyone else who's trying to build these sort of systems. And that means that we're very well placed to be a bit of a beacon for how this can work so well. So take the forestry example. They took a punt on us, basically. So they funded a bit of that work to take our bedbug detector and make it work outdoors for the particular pest that they had. And off the back of that, they're forecasting they're going to halve their insecticide use just from deploying those monitors. That's huge. And that's in an industry where, you wouldn't imagine forestry would be the leading part of this. And in agriculture, the opportunities to have an impact are even greater. So we're starting to work with some of the big growers of some of the crops, for example, in South America, growing oranges and cotton and other things like that, where chemical use is very much, they will just spray anyway attitude on that. But they're very keen to shift away from it because it's horrendously expensive. So actually, it's proving out now that both the business case and the environmental case are really well aligned. Often people start thinking about these things and assume that there's going to be a conflict there, and you're going to have to twist someone's arm into spending more money to make an environmental benefit. And actually, we haven't found that at all. That actually, in an awful lot of cases, you can have a bigger benefit to the environment and help people make more money or save money. There isn't, in this particular case, there isn't a conflict there, provided the technology is good enough and affordable, which we're in a great position to provide now.
And it scales the technology. That's the beauty with this platform and technology. I'm so used to dealing with companies which are scaling, materials or chemicals, and they need a big facility and a plant, and there's big capex. This is much more capital kind of light model, right?
Yeah.
So are there constraints?
There are. I mean, it's ultimately, there's a hardware element. So it's not like it's a software business where you can just Control-C, Control-V a billion times and have zero cost attached to that. We do build a physical product that has to be shipped and installed and in the farm or the forest or wherever it needs to be. But you're right, though, that it is, this is not a capital intensive business by any stretch. The hardware costs in here are not the major dominant factor for anyone involved. And that's because we've been able to do the engineering to make them affordable and not the multi-$1,000 things that have been floating around for the last 10 years or so.
Yeah. Yeah, no, great. Tell me, as a CEO, founder of the business, is your heart still very much in the building and the technology and the electrics and the how it all kind of fits together? Or have you moved a bit away from that?
I was the techie for the first 10, 15 years of my career. I studied engineering, did electronics, did nanotechnology, did all those sensors of medical device and things. I absolutely loved that. And the last 4 or 5 years or so, I've basically stepped away from that completely. From me, that we have a fantastic team at our base in Cambridge. We're able to recruit some of the best technical people, far better than I ever was, to join the team, and it's all in very safe hands now. So my focus is really around building the commercial side of the business and working out which markets we're going to go after next. What are the challenges that our customers actually face? And I'm relishing that as a challenge of spending an awful lot of time understanding industries that I never expected to be talking to ministers of agriculture in the Middle East about the challenges they have with these programs, and being able to understand, okay, so it's not actually, it's both the damage the insects doing, but it's also just the challenge of managing these armies of people and getting the data back out of the field. It's all paper based. So okay, yeah, as an engineer, I can do something to help that, and that I find finding that part of the journey very exciting.
Yeah, great. Tell me when you consider the business now, right, and where you want to get to. So I'm right in thinking you raised a seed fund. That was your last kind of financing.
That's right. Yes. So we did sort of late seed stage. Strong revenue across 3 different product lines now, and gearing up towards a Series A in the next few months.
Got it. Okay. And is the model for you, from an investor viewpoint, finding venture capital companies? Is that the best kind of model when you think about?
Well, we've actually got a really great mix of investors at the moment. So we've got some professional VCs. Our early rounds were done with angels, but we've got some really expert VCs. So the Yield Lab, Specialist Agritech VC, for example. But then in the more recent rounds, we've also started bringing in some people with some really sector specialist knowledge around our board tables. So at our last round, we were fortunate enough to welcome a M&L Group, who are a hotel owning group who invest in tech for hotels and also own their own hotels. So they're now a customer and a very knowledgeable voice about the strategy for that product in the boardroom, which is very welcome. And then the other one was Steel. So everyone knows them for their chainsaws, but of course they're a major supplier to the entire forestry industry and incredibly knowledgeable about that, and have infrastructure set up to sell to every single country in the world, basically. So again, having their insight and advice on that as a corporate venture team rather than an out and out VC has been really welcome and very valuable for us.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I know we had discussed, I mean, you mentioned at the beginning of the show, your foray into the hotel bedbug market in February 2020.
Yes, yeah. We had an amazing first 2 weeks of sales. I was really buoyed up about it, and we were in the middle of a funding round as well. We'd done a soft launch of the product in 2019. We demonstrated that it worked. We had our first few customers who were very happy. I was interviewing for sales and marketing people for the hotel space specifically. And then, the whole thing unraveled in front of us. It was a painful, well, we originally thought it was just going to be a few months, but of course, we know how naive that was now. But yes, so we were very fortunate that the investors who were there at the time, they sort of, we hadn't agreed the investment, nothing had been signed, but it was all looking pretty good, and we were raising there to go and start building a dedicated team to drive forward that hospitality business. And I consider myself very, very lucky with the people that we've taken investment from. That most investors would have seen that happen, they would have run a mile, and ours turned around and said, actually, no. You've got something here. You see the bigger picture. Bedbugs was just a stepping stone. It's a beachhead. This is, the $500 billion market's still there. That list of insects you told us you want to go after over the next few years, that's still there. We're going to back you. Change the plan, obviously. Don't go and hire a hotel salesperson at this point in February 2020. Change the plan, but we're behind you. That was a moment that easily could have ended us. Would have ended a lot of companies in our situation, but because we had the right people involved backing us, and that's particularly the Cambridge Angels group deserves a huge amount of credit for that they kept us going, and that set the stage for everything that came. And that, because of that, actually, it meant that we diversified into a range of markets much earlier than we were forced into it. conventional startup wisdom, of course, is you pick one market, you nail one market, you don't pivot until you've either succeeded or killed it. That choice was taken away from us. But actually now, where we are today, with a platform technology that we can quite quickly and cheaply deploy to different insects, it doesn't take a massive amount of R&D, and operating in markets like agriculture and forestry where you have one sales cycle a year. And that's, in a conventional startup wisdom is, move fast and break stuff. And you can do that when you get lots of bites of the cherry and lots of other customers, and you screw up one thing over here, you can iterate and do the next. It doesn't work so well in agritech because you get seasonal buying cycles. You raise for an 18-month, 2-year plan, you might get 1 or 2 chances to sell to your customers in that cycle. So it's a fundamental gearing problem about the agritech industry and how a lot of investors don't get the patience that's necessary for it. But the way we've squared, one is have patient investors, but the other is have a bit of a mix of different markets on the go so that we are testing product market fit in 3 or 4 different places every year, not just one.
Yeah, awesome. No, it sounds like it's been some journey.
Yeah, so there's been a few stressful moments. Yeah, that was probably the worst of them. But it's a roller coaster. It always is.
Yeah, absolutely. What kind of challenge are the biggest challenges you face now when you think about your kind of vision and what you really want to achieve over the next 5 to 10 years? As you look at the future, what are the 2 or 3 main challenges you think?
So the biggest one is really around the point that we were just talking about. So if we're and this is common to everybody, every startup in agritech, is that there's a pretty well trialed model for how large farms buy technology, and it is you show it to them, they'll agree to let you give it to them for free for a year or 2, and then maybe they'll consider buying it. So generally, that is a 2-year journey from first meeting to any meaningful revenue. And even then, it might only be a small percentage of the farm. And that kills a lot of agritech startups because you can't get funding for that long often. And you need to show some traction. And how do you show traction if people are, they might absolutely love it, but just that process is so ingrained after 50 years of this is how we do test new things that it's very difficult to buck the trend. Now, we've been very fortunate that we found some specific niches where we haven't had to do that. We've got customers paying upfront in advance for a full year of service for a product we haven't actually built and shown them yet. But that is, from everything I've seen and the other agtech founders I've spoken to, is pretty much unheard of in this industry. Now, if you're in software, you can afford to give your product away for free for a bit and go down a bit of a freemium model or free trials and things. We don't have that luxury because it's a hardware cost. And while it's not capital intensive, it's still meaningful amounts of money for a seed stage business. So we can't give it away for free. So finding those areas where what we do so well aligns to the pain and the value proposition is so clear that people are willing to put some money in up front. It's also a massive indicator that, we have something that the industry really, really needs. If frankly, if even farmers will pay up front, which is very rare, you must have something that's massively valuable.
Absolutely. No, I get the conundrum. I see it, and it looks like you're addressing it in the right way. You mentioned the word pain, so it's worth really understanding pain points and
absolutely.
But it's a challenge, isn't it? It's to bring them to the party around paying up front for things. Sure.
Yes, and there's a tendency, I think, a lot of companies end up because they end up having to look for the short-term revenue. They end up drifting into academic-y pilots, studies, maybe grant funding, which it's a necessary step. But if you lose sight of the fact that ultimately you need to make a product that customers will buy, you haven't really got any proof of market until you have a customer paying you some money. So that's something we've been pretty militant about because we got it wrong in the past. Previous business before Spotta, my co-founder and I, we had the classic engineer of we'll build it and they'll come. And like everyone else who has that attitude, we were completely wrong. And we've determined never to make that mistake again.
Yeah, no, understand. And do you have to, is there a development piece with the product for different, you mentioned different regions, for instance, different conditions, etc. Is that where the development kind of cost comes in?
There's a couple of elements. So one is our device, it has a radio system inside it. There's local regulations around that. the same ways that your mobile phone in the UK doesn't work in the US, you have a different version. It's exactly the same for all radio equipment. So you have to go and run through some tests and get certified by the local body in each country or each region. Relatively easy, pretty straightforward, but there's a cost involved in doing that and takes a little bit of time. So that's one bit that we have to do for regionalization. The other bit is when we're looking at a new insect, our platform is really around the electronics, the firmware, the software. When we go to work for a particular insect, what almost always is the case is that there will be a manual trap. For this type of insect, you use a green bucket that hangs from a tree. For this type of insect, you use a bit of yellow sticky paper that put on a post. And it's taking that and retrofitting our smart equipment into that example, basically. So, which is why our products, if you look at our website, they all look completely different, but actually inside 80-90% of the technology is identical. It's just not the visible bit.
Yeah.
But then there's some work so we have an entomology lab, 2 PhD entomologists on the team in Cambridge, where we get live specimens, we get those traps, we get the pheromones, we do all of those tests to make sure that we can get the bugs in front of our camera, basically, so that we can identify them correctly. That's the main bit that we need to change from one version to another.
Yeah.
But we've got quicker and quicker at doing that. So our first product, it took us probably most of 2 years to develop. The second one for forestry took us about a year and a bit. Since then, it's 3 months typically to do a new version for a new insect. And in some cases, it's a matter of, it can be days. Some cases it's a little bit longer. It just depends on the insect in question.
Yeah, no, great, thank you. Look, a final kind of question for me. I'm thinking, well, first of all, how many people work for the company?
We've got 26.
26, yeah. I was going to say, what for you are the main traits and characteristics of a Spotta employee?
So the most important one is openness and transparency. That we're at a stage now where we are a pretty, a small, close-knit team, mostly under one roof, although we have a number of people who are working remotely in our particular markets, but predominantly most of the team is together in Cambridge, working day in, day out on this stuff. And we're working on multiple different products. And because of that, there's a very natural tendency for a bit of, pet projectism. And actually what we need to be able to do, and that both technically but also commercially as well, is having people who are able to sit back and look the situation very clearly in the eye and say, this is working, this is not. We need to solve this, otherwise we're going to fall over down here. So Spotta is not a place for egos. We work very hard to make decisions on a calculated risk taking. That is what startup life is. But doing that in as rational and as informed way as we can do. And because of that, we have to be completely honest with ourselves and with everyone else on the team about how things are going. There's no room for sugarcoating or gloss.
Yeah, I love that. And listen, Robert, fantastic conversation. Really thank you for sharing, your incredible journey and the innovative work you're doing at Spotta. And really your vision around kind of transforming pest management through advanced sensing technologies. Very exciting and inspiring. And, look, to our listeners, thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed today's episode, share it with your network, leave a review, and stay with us for more stories from leaders on a mission. So until next time, keep driving the innovation.